Welcome to the 5 o'clock show. It's time for Common Sense. Now, it's Katz and Cosby with John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby, standing for truth, justice, and the American way, bringing common sense to the world. Now, here's John Katzimatidis and Rita Cosby.
Well, we are back, John. A big day.
Well, today, a lot of news when we have some breaking news that is happening right now. And I think let's go to the breaking news and we'll introduce everybody right after that. Let's go breaking news.
Breaking news, WABC.
Well, breaking news from John Solomon of Just the News. John Solomon, tell us what the heck is going on.
Yes, we do have some breaking news. It has echoes to a scandal a decade ago. We all remember the Fast and Furious scandal a decade ago where federal agents let guns across the border to Mexico and hoping that they could discover some crimes that they could then prosecute. Well, in this case, it's not guns being exported, but something more recent. Instead, it's a suspected terrorist being imported into the United States knowingly. Just the News has obtained government documents showing that the FBI allowed Asif Raza Merchant, that's that Pakistani man we learned about Monday, who's been charged with plotting to assassinate Donald Trump and others. The FBI allowed him to enter the United States in April, and they did so by giving him a special permission known as significant public benefit parole. Now, they did that even though they knew he was flagged on a terrorism watch list for the United States and that he had admitted he had just traveled to Iran. The FBI can't explain why it's done it. It's declined to tell us why they allowed a man on the terrorist watch list who had just traveled to Iran in the middle of a very high-risk era in terrorism, why they would let him into the country. But here's what we learned. They gave him permission to stay through May 11th. He stayed here through July 12th when they finally arrested him. Why did they arrest him? Well, while he was here, this man ran into a person who became a cooperating witness for the FBI, and that cooperating witness said, hey, he's working to assassinate Donald Trump and other terrorists, and he was about to leave the country, and the FBI rolled him up and arrested him. But they allowed this guy in the country for more than 2 months, despite major red flags. Lots of reaction in Congress right now, people in disbelief that this happened.
That is big disbelief. Holy cow, that's all I could say. I mean, I like to know. I like to know if political operatives at the Justice Department were pushing those buttons.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't know yet. We know the FBI is there and that they gave these instructions to the Border Patrol, and that's how the guy got into the country. But it's funny to have the name. The name of this parole is called Significant Public Benefit. What public benefit could there be to allowing a flagged terrorist with ties to Iran to come into the country? I think that's a question a lot of members of Congress are going to be asking.
It doesn't make sense. And, you know, my biggest fear? That there'll be another attempt on President Trump's life, and they're going to blame Iran.
Yeah, that's a very real scenario. And on that note, John, it's funny you would mention that. Last night, we obtained other documents showing that the Border Patrol warned all of its agents yesterday that there is a high probability that Iran is going to sneak operatives, money, or armaments across the U.S. southern border to try to attack the United States in a terror attack. It's the first time we've specifically heard a warning that Iran is trying to strike inside our soil. This comes a couple of weeks after Iran attacked young children playing soccer in Golan Heights in Israel. That was cited in this warning memo. But for the first time, the Border Patrol is saying, hey, there's a good reason to be on the lookout for Iranians who might want to come into the country and cause loss of life and damage here. That story broke last night, and a lot of people paying attention to it today.
John Solomon is a person who loves law enforcement, and we love all law enforcement. If there's any political people at the Justice Department that is forcing the FBI to do certain things, somebody should stand up and say, danger, danger, danger. I mean, it's just the American people deserve to know the truth.
They do, and that's one of the great things they get on your great radio show every day. We have to tell people the facts and let them make up their mind, and these facts have a lot of people scratching their head today.
God bless you, and God bless America. And John, you do wonderful work, and thank you for working in collaboration with WABC.
It's a great honor. Thanks for having me on today.
Thank you.
Wow. John, that is big stuff. The fact that he's in the country, come on.
First of all, I don't know what kind of special permit they got. They came in, and he came in. And they said that the Border Patrol stopped him, and the FBI told the Border Patrol let him in. So the truth is, we don't know what the whole truth is.
Yeah, we don't know.
So I welcome anybody that does know the whole truth and nothing but the truth. That WABC, we're here waiting.
But it's a lot of questions. And I just want to say one other thing, too. Another big story that broke in the last 24 hours are two guys who were arrested with ties to Al-Qaeda and ISIS that were targeting a Taylor Swift concert, which is 65,000 people in Austria, in Vienna, John. And they found out there's a report today that one of the guys, he was a 19-year-old guy, and he ended up planning to be a security guard at that event.
He was hired.
Yes, he was hired to be a security guard, Governor Patterson.
Now,
I mean, how scary
by the
is
way,
that?
Later on, just to let everybody know, we got Robert Kennedy coming on. And he finally has security protection, and we're going to find out. And we have Joe Contra coming on. Nick Bryant, that wrote the truth. Today's the 50th anniversary of the Nixon resignation. And here we have Ed Cox, his son-in-law, and he thinks that Nixon got screwed or whatever. But Ed Cox, you give us your opinion afterwards.
I'll have to hear what he has to say,
Okay.
but there is clearly a lot of malfeasance that was done in Washington with respect to Watergate, ex parte conversations between the prosecutor and Judge Sirica, and supposedly confidential information that was passed by a grand jury to the Judiciary Committee. This is shocking stuff.
And you made a documentary on this, right?
I also talked to Speaker Kevin McCarthy about a half hour ago. Can we? I'm going to play a little tidbit, but the rest of it is going to play on Sunday on the Cats Roundtable. Play the Kevin McCarthy tidbit. Well, breaking news from John Solomon. With us today is the former Speaker, Kevin McCarthy. So many things are happening in our country. So many things are happening in the world. Well, Mr. Speaker, so many things are happening. Where do you want to start?
Let's start about the new selection for vice president nominee on the Democrat side.
Nobody ever heard of this person before yesterday.
You know, I worked with him in Congress, actually. We went into Congress together. And when I thought about who she had a choice to pick, I was shocked he picked Tim Walz. No one really knows him. But you know who really wanted him? Ilhan Omar and Bernie Sanders. This is by far not just a liberal. This is the most liberal ticket in the history of American politics.
So where do we go from here? I mean, it looks like that a lot of people are excited about Harris, and they've made certain moves on the polls.
Well, the thing I'd look at, I think they're excited Joe Biden is not the nominee. Everybody would say whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Joe Biden was not up for the job. He was going to lose. So they were excited that it was replaced. Kamala was not the first pick. And remember, no one ever voted for her. She pulled out of the presidential race. No one in this primary. The Democrats don't believe in democracy, how they go about doing this. I mean, all of this race should be, get the personalities out of it, and let's just make it about policy. Under Harris's VP, you've evacuated 5 embassies. We got turmoil in the Middle East. We've got war in Ukraine. Putin, the only time Putin did not invade another country was under President Trump. So, I mean, I really think we've got to shift this campaign to just talk about the issues and really get to know who is Kamala Harris, who is Tim Walz, what is their policy, and what is their philosophy. And I think this race could be a really big win for America and President Trump.
Mr. Speaker, what else would you like to talk about?
Well, I will tell you, it's crucial that the media does not allow a path. The American public, because think about this. Kamala Harris didn't go through any primaries. She didn't have to go through any debates. The country didn't get to ask her any questions. We watched the failure of what she's done from being in charge of the border and others. And now we're sitting less than 90 days out before the election, and there's no accountability. The American public has a right to know. Are you going to continue to carry on these policies of inflation? Are you going to keep the border wide open? Are you going to continue to be weak around the world? And Tim Walz doesn't make her more conservative. She's going further to the left. I think people have a right to ask questions and have it answered. I think the media needs to do that.
He's right. And by the way, John, just a little bit ago, President Trump did a press conference, took questions on a whole slew of topics for an hour. It was like nothing was off limits. And it's a great question. Where is Kamala Harris? She hasn't done anything.
She hasn't. She ever since she got nominated for the presidency, she has not done a press conference.
Absolutely, and she hasn't done a sit-down interview either.
So I am not convinced. I am not convinced she will do a press conference. Governor Patterson, what do you think?
I think that within 24 hours she became the nominee, and over that period of time, there are probably questions she wouldn't have enough information to answer. So she doesn't want to look bad, but I'm sure she'll have a press conference within the next week. And
you think she can really dance on the debate floor?
I don't see any reason why she can't, based on where she got. And the same goes for President Trump. It should be a pretty interesting conversation.
Yeah, and debate, by the way, John, you brought up debate. They have agreed, both sides, to September 10th. Yeah. So far, it's on ABC.
And President Trump threw out 3 dates.
Yep.
And Kamala Harris only has chosen one so far.
Right, September 10th.
Which I see as a mistake. If you want to be president of the United States and you have to prove it to the American people, why are you walking away from debates? People usually walk away from debates and don't have them when they're way ahead in the polls. They don't think they can be beaten. She can easily be beaten. She can also win. And I've always noticed in politics, and unless you've been in debates in these situations, you probably wouldn't understand this. You really want to debate on your opponent's territory, because then you're standing there alone, seemingly, against everyone else. And Trump is great at that. She's got to be great at it, too, if she wants to get elected.
Yeah, absolutely. You better be able to handle it.
What I said to everybody is the fact that the GOP debate, the GOP went up 10 points. Or the GOP convention. The Democratic convention is going to go up 10 points. And my favorite song, See You in September.
Right.
I think September, everything gets sorted out to see where the heck we are.
Well done. That's a great point, John. You're right. It's a lifetime.
Everybody agree on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Except for the demonstrations that may happen around the Chicago convention.
Well, they got rid of the Jew.
Oh, and that's where they bring up a headache for me.
That's where they threaten.
Those folks will not give up. They will be there. And the mayor this time will be encouraging them because he's one of them, as opposed to 68 when Daley was against them. So we'll see how it plays out.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point.
All right. We have a special guest on, Rita. You bring him back?
Yes, we do. We have Peter Schweizer, the great investigative journalist. He's also the president of the Government Accountability Institute. And Peter, we were just talking about, of course, Kamala Harris and also Tim Walz. You have some interesting stuff because you're one of the great investigative journalists out there, my friend, and you've done some interesting research on China ties with Tim Walz. He's gone over there 30 times, including for his honeymoon. But there's a lot of interesting stuff. What have you uncovered?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at Walz. We're just starting the investigation, but there's some very interesting things that show up. One is he ran this student exchange program where he brought students over there regularly. That program was actually approved by the Chinese Communist Party, and they actually financially sponsored those student exchanges. And what's interesting is when you look at some of the media accounts from local newspapers of students who went on those trips, they talk about the fact that Walz told the American students going to China that when they traveled there, that they should downplay their Americanness, which is kind of an odd statement, I think. If cultural exchanges, you're trying to learn about each other. And it would be highly insulting to tell Chinese students to come to the United States to play down your Chineseness. So that kind of is an odd statement. But it gets even more interesting when you look at as his relationships move forward. So when he ran for governor, was elected governor, he took an unusual step of inviting Chinese diplomats to attend his inauguration. And the Chinese media wrote up a very glowing profile of him and sort of what his connections are. In 2019, he gave a speech to a known United Front group called the Chinese People's Association for Friendship and Foreign Countries with the United States. He was a headline speaker at the event. This is an entity that, going back to the Clinton administration, every American administration, including the Obama-Biden administration, recognized as a entity that is designed to spur CCP influence and really, enhance the party of the state. It also has ties to Chinese intelligence. When you look at his record, he has made some statements about human rights in China, but they're not really critical of the Chinese system. And in fact, he's made statements that try to create kind of I think, ridiculous moral equivalence. Tiananmen Square, he was married on the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. His wife says that he wanted to do that so he could remember the date of his anniversary. But on the floor of Congress.
By the way, Peter, remind everybody what happened during Tiananmen Square. I mean, why it's just such a bizarre connection to say I want to have my wedding there, my anniversary.
Well, you're exactly right, and this comes to the point of the moral equivalence. He went on the floor of Congress and said, yes, what happened in Tiananmen Square was bad, but all countries have these kinds of histories. And he brought up the example of Wounded Knee in the United States in 1863. But let's compare those two events. Wounded Knee, 38 Native Americans were massacred. It immediately became a national scandal in the United States, and rightfully so. Tiananmen Square, 10,000 students were killed by the Chinese military. And by the way,
10,000?
Yep.
10,000.
My God, I had forgotten.
Yeah, it was a huge amount. Wow.
And he's celebrating that as his anniversary?
Well, he's comparing it to Wounded Knee, which is a ridiculous comparison. It's like saying, I had heart surgery and you had a sprained ankle. They are both painful and they are both terrible, but to compare them, but here's the kicker. President Xi, the current president of China, his wife is a famous singer. Not only has he not denounced Tiananmen Square, his wife actually the day after Tiananmen Square serenaded the troops who had massacred the students. So it's this sort of false equivalence, this kind of, they've done some bad things, but so have we, that really fits into what the Chinese want from leaders in the West, which is what they call big help with a little bad mouth. That's their phrase, not mine.
Peter? Words, hold on. I want to bring in, I also want to bring in Ed Cox, too, because Ed Cox knows China well.
Peter, there's no doubt that Waltz is a panda hugger. Of long-standing, and Tiananmen was one of it's still, Chinese people still remember it, but they cannot remember it officially or even unofficially without being punished by the government because the government wants to hide it.
Yes, you're exactly right. Here's the other thing, by the way, that we discovered. Very interesting. I know you guys have talked about it, and there's been reporting about these secret police stations that the Chinese have in the United States where they use people to threaten and intimidate, Chinese communities that are people that are living in the United States, American citizens. One of those 7 is actually in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And interestingly, the location of that police station is in an organization that is closely partnered with a group called Minnesota Global, which is a pro-Waltz organization that he works with regularly. And so while, during 2020 and after that, he has aggressively denounced police brutality in the Twin Cities, he has done nothing and said nothing about this police station, this Chinese police station that's operating in the Twin Cities. So again, it's this weird kind of inconsistency that seems to consistently play to the advantage of China. And we are just now starting to look into some of the commercial ties that he has brought from China into Minnesota, and we expect to have more on that in the days ahead.
Well, keep us
all I
posted.
can say is, holy cow.
Yeah, well, it is. Peter, definitely keep us posted. You got to come back on. You always get such important stuff. The great investigative journalist, Peter Schweizer. Thank you, Peter.
And we're going to take a break.
Thank you, Peter.
We're going to take a break right now. We're going to come back with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and let's take that break.
A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Cats and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Cats and Cosby. And of course, as we are looking towards the big election, there's another candidate beyond Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Also, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And joining us now is the one and only Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert, it's so great to have you here on Cats and Cosby. I want to bring in, because you're in the middle, I think the trial just wrapped up, but it's a trial. They were essentially, the Democratic National Committee was trying to kick you off the ballot in New York. Explain this and also how this has ended up.
Yeah, I mean, the argument is that I'm not a New Yorker, but let me explain to you what happened, Rita. We were required to get 47,000 signatures in 45 days in New York to get on the ballot, and that's something that a law that was passed by the Democrats to make sure that nobody could do it, that it was insurmountable. We got over 150,000 signatures. So there's 150,000 people in this state, voters, who said that they wanted me on the ballot. We had got 1 million signatures nationwide in all 50 states, and those Americans want me on the ballot. The DNC is trying to block those people and others from being able to cast their vote for me. So they sued me, saying that I had lied about being a New York citizen. So I've been a New Yorker since 1964, since my dad ran for Senate here. And by the way, they called him a carpetbagger and said he wasn't a New Yorker. I voted in this state my whole life. I've never voted anywhere else. My driver's license is from the state. My car is registered in the state. My law practice and my law office are in the state. My law license is in the state. I'm not a registered attorney in California. I moved out to California in 2014 to move with Cheryl. But the key is, when they evaluate domicile, they ask for two things: where do you vote and where do you intend to return to? And my plan and Cheryl's plan has always been to return here when her acting career over. So we consulted the best attorney in the country, a guy called Paul Ross. He's the best ballot access attorney. It's all he does. He's world famous. And I said, I have three residences: my New York residence, my California residence, and I have a house up on the Cape. And he said, where do you vote and where do you intend to return to? I said, New York. And he said, the DNC is going to sue you no matter what. The only place that you can claim is New York. Why is that? Because what you put on the New York petition has to be consistent. It has to be the same domicile that you put on every other petition in 50 states. And there are many states, for example, New Hampshire, where your domicile is where you vote. In fact, you have to, and I had to take an oath saying that my domicile was in New York because I voted in New York.
So, Robert, let me ask you, Robert, how did it end up? Like, where is it going now with the case? Because you make a great point with your history here of New York.
Right. And and we don't know. I mean, clearly we won the case. My attorney came in there and testified as to what he had told me. And he said, look, you're going to be in front of the same judge in no matter what happens. If you say California, if you say Massachusetts, if you say New York, the proper thing to say is New York. And I took his advice and I put down New York. So, we know that the courts in New York have been politicized. I'm hoping that we get a fair judgment from this judge. We'll see in the next couple of days.
And let me ask you, Robert, real quick, is this sort of par for the course? Because this comes as the Democrats seem to want to block you. I should say the Kamala Harris-Biden White House seem to want to block you at every turn. I mean, they weren't giving you Secret Service protection for the longest time. They're trying to kick you off the ballots. They're trying to say you're not a New York resident. Does this just feel like another sort of attack to keep a bona fide, well-qualified candidate off the ballot?
Yeah, and, the Democratic Party, I think, would be unrecognizable to my father, to my uncle. Their Democratic Party was fighting for voting rights for people in every state. And every American could vote for the individual that they wanted to vote for. And they fought very hard side by side with Martin Luther King to make sure that nobody could deny voting rights to American citizens. And the Democratic Party today, its function is it's spending hundreds of millions of dollars not promoting its candidates or talking about their records, but rather trying to deny ballot access using lawfare, using the law courts to deny ballot access to candidates. Kamala Harris and President Biden a couple months ago were denigrating Vladimir Putin because he won 88% of the vote in his election in Russia. And they said the only way he did that is because he controlled the press and because he wouldn't let his opponents run. Well, the same thing is happening here, but it's the DNC that's doing it. I heard President Trump a lot more in the polls. 57% of my voters say that if I leave the race, they're going to vote for President Trump. So President Trump has a lot more to lose from my presence in the race, but he does not spend money trying to attack me. It's very strange to me.
Mr. Kennedy, how is the Secret Service protection? Do you have enough right now?
Oh yeah, I've got more than I've got an overabundance right now. Thanks for asking.
I am so glad because we want you to be okay. And Ed Cox, you want to ask a question,
Mr. Kennedy? I have no doubt that you are a New Yorker. Anyone who on the spot knows the laws with respect to the fact that you can pick up a dead bear on the road and take it home to you and put the meat. That means you are a New Yorker.
Yeah, well, you can get it in New York State. You're allowed to pick up a dead bear as long as you get a bear tag within 24 hours. And yeah, I do know those laws.
Well, Robert Kennedy, what else would you like to tell? We got about 2 minutes left. What else would you like to tell all Americans?
Yeah, I'm going to be on every ballot now in every state. We've got signatures now. We've done something everybody said we couldn't do. We've got more signatures than any presidential candidate in history. They made, after Ross Perot did this, they changed the rules to make sure that nobody could ever do it again, could run as independent. And, we've managed to do something that no candidate in history has been able to do. And,
are they going to include you in the debates? I understand they agreed on one debate on September 10th already.
I think they are going to try to do everything to keep me out. So we'll see what happens.
Understood.
Wow. Well, Robert, thank you so much. It's really great to have you here. Keep us posted on New York, and we all agree you're a New Yorker, and we're also glad that you're protected, too. And you have a right to get out there and campaign, and everybody has a right to hear your message. So thank you. You're welcome here on the show anytime.
Thanks so much, Rita. Thanks, Sean. Ed, good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you.
Okay, thank you. And now we got some hot news.
It's the top news of the day, sponsored by Goya. Here's Rita Cosby.
And here are some of the big Goya headlines of the day. Former President Trump, as we said here at the top of Katz and Cosby, spoke to reporters today from Mar-a-Lago in Florida. He talked about his plan in combating an open border, crime, and a lot more. Tropical storm Debbie is hitting North Carolina with tornadoes and rain. Debbie is likely to become a tropical depression this afternoon or this evening. And also, today marks 1 year since the Lahaina wildfire on Maui that claimed 102 lives, and still no official cause or origin of the fire has been determined.
Wow.
Yeah, how sad. And John, those are the top stories of the day.
That's a wow story. I mean, they know, but I don't think they're telling us.
Yeah, exactly.
My opinion.
By the way, I agree. My opinion too, John. I agree. And we're going to have a little bit more shortly.
You're commuting home with Katz and Cosby. Now, here's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. And, of course, everybody watching their money, watching investments. And joining us now is someone who has great advice for everybody and knows it all too well, Paul Stone. He is the CEO of Colonial Metals Group. Paul, it's so great to have you here. Tell us also why gold is really a great investment right now.
It's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. When you look at a world swirling in uncertainty, you look for stability, right? And so one of the properties of gold and silver is it can't be made in a lab, right? The government isn't printing it. You can't print your dinner, right? And you can't print gold and silver. When you look around the world financed by printed money and you look at the political scene here and outside of our borders, you got to start kind of looking for yourself, doing a little research for yourself to think, is the location of my savings carrying and offering me the integrity that I want it to have? And so one of the things I've always said to folks, if you maybe not look at gold and silver as an investment, but as a location for money, there's kind of four choices. There's cash in a safe at home, in the real estate world, in the financial world, and in the vault or a safe at home. And when you look at the constructs of those four options, right, cash in a safe at home is under attack from the Washington printing press because they actually don't know how to solve problems. They just know how to create them. They think more money will solve the problems. If we just step back for a second and think, well, we gave them a $35 trillion shot. So have they solved all the problems? No. And you think about the real estate world, real estate prices are zooming in many ways because of the money printing over the last few decades, causing home prices to well exceed what their reality pricing would be. And then you look at the financial world and you think, oh my goodness, is there anything scary for you there? The constructs of the depository or a safe at home is those assets are absolutely titled in your name. Those gold and silver assets are coming from a sovereign mint that's your personal property, and it turns back into money with a phone call.
Wow.
Really powerful. Really powerful.
And the difference between gold and bitcoins, what do you think gold is? I think gold is a better investment than bitcoins. That's my expression, because bitcoins, you never know what the real story is.
Yeah. So the real story on gold is it was supposedly created when two suns collided billions of years ago. The gold you would hold in your hands today is older than the planet you're standing on. And supposedly it's Satoshi Nakashima who created Bitcoin. A figure of, come to the podium, please, and help us understand how you created this miraculous currency. No one can claim who created Bitcoin, right? So what's the origin of that? And when you think about access, the only way that I understand you can get access to Bitcoin is through a device. Gold and silver can be in my pocket. It could be in my hip. And when folks say, well, you can't spend gold and silver at a store, I'd say you better hope the days never come where you are having to spend gold and silver at
Otherwise,
a store.
the end is near after that.
Right.
Rita, I understand you have Joe Concha on?
Yeah, great. We have Joe Concha. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank
that was
you, Paul.
really
Thank you for having
powerful.
me. Hope it's
Thank
helpful.
you. Absolutely. Yep. Paul Stone with Colonial Metals Group. Awesome. Thank you so much. Such an important thing, especially given the uncertainty right now in the world. And joining us now, we have Joe Concha. He is, of course, the great media expert there at Fox News. And he also has a brand new book called Progressively Worse, which is sure to be another huge, big bestseller. Joe, first off, we just heard from President Trump a little bit ago. He did a news conference, answered a million questions. And the press should be saying, well, where is Kamala Harris? She's not answering a single question at a press conference. Your thoughts?
Rita Katz, by my count, Donald Trump took 42 questions during this press conference. That's exactly 42 more questions than Kamala Harris has taken since Joe Biden was bullied out of running again 18 days ago. Here's a fun stat, by the way. Ms. Harris has not held a single press conference in the 5+ years she's been on the presidential level, vice presidential level, since she first announced running for president back in early 2019. She also has not earned a single vote. And by the way, Trump's strategy here was a masterstroke regarding these debates, because in the modern political era, it has always been traditional that the general election candidates hold 3 presidential debates. So given the precedent, Harris has to agree to the 3 debates Trump agreed to on Fox, on NBC, on ABC, because otherwise she will be the very coward she and her media allies hilariously accused Trump, the guy who took a shot nearly to his head in his ear just a couple of weeks ago, of being. So this teleprompter candidacy for Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, the momentum is changing. You could feel it. The sugar high is ending, guys.
Judge Weinberg.
Joe, good to talk to you again. I'll tell you what's troubling to me.
Hey, Judge.
Not only are they trying to hide Harris the same way they hid Biden, but what they're also trying to do, in the most Orwellian sense, is whitewash her record, reinvent this woman. Yeah. She has a record, as does Walz, and they're in total denial, and they expect the American people to buy that there's a new Kamala Harris, who closed the border, who's always for fracking, has great concerns about inflation. She's already said day one she's a top deal with inflation. By the way, wasn't she the one who broke the ties to pass all that legislation that raised the inflationary rate?
The Inflation Reduction Act that didn't reduce inflation, Judge? Yes, exactly.
It increased inflation.
Exactly. Thank you. Look, here's the record, guys. And this is all on tape. It's all on video. It's not grainy video. This is what she said when she was running for president the first time and while she's been vice president. Kamala Harris opposes domestic energy like fracking and fossil fuels. She opposes ICE, border wall construction, remain in Mexico policy. She supports, however, sanctuary cities, which in New York, we see how that's working out for us. She supports sex changes for minors, like my 10-year-old daughter, my 8-year-old son, without the parents even knowing, without our permission. She supports raising taxes, which worked out really well for Walter Mondale. She supports violent felons voting from jail. She wants to expand the Supreme Court. She wants to end the filibuster. And another, by the way, and I'll leave it here. If the economy is a number one issue, answer this question. What business experience, like Katz has, does Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have exactly when they're going to solve this whole inflation issue? Because the answer is zero. That's kind of a big deal, and I think that's something that Trump should absolutely hammer home.
And by the way, your book, Joe Concha, is called Progressively Worse. It does get worse because she picks Tim Walz. Just as you brought up. I mean, you talked about a lot of the policies of Kamala Harris. When I look at Tim Walz, all I kept thinking about is burn, baby, burn, because that's what he allowed to happen in Minneapolis when he was the governor. He could have sent in the National Guard. He did not. And then, to me, when you look at it, he has to answer questions, too. I can't wait for that debate when it's him and J.D. Vance.
J.D. Vance, is practically a genius, so that should be very interesting, because you're right. $500 million in damage to Minneapolis. The police precinct looked like the Nakatomi Plaza at the end of Die Hard when that was burned to the ground. And as you said, Walz could have brought in the National Guard days earlier after all that violence began, but he refused to. And you go through his record, and it's even scarier than Kamala Harris. I mean, this is a guy who installed tampon machines in elementary school boys' bathrooms. Again, I have a third grader. I can't even think about what maniac would do something like that. This guy supported a carbon-free electrical grid by 2040 in Minnesota, which, by the way, if you last heard, has the coldest weather basically in the country, and that's just simply not going to work. This guy also supports sanctuary cities. There's an interview he did on CNN 2019 where he said he wanted to invest in a ladder company just to allow illegal migrants to get over Trump's border wall and enter the country. So I can't believe that Kamala Harris blew this utter 2-inch putt as far as you pick Josh Shapiro. He's a popular governor in Pennsylvania. It's 61% approval. Whoever wins Pennsylvania probably wins the election. And instead, she goes with somebody even more left than Bernie Sanders. And I think this is the big game changer right here, guys. And the debates, as I said before, I'll say it again, those are everything as far as Trump and Harris. And at least we know there's one in the books. There should be 3.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. Joe, great to have you here, and congrats on another big book. Thank you, Joe. We love you. Thank you.
Joe.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rita. Judge Katz.
By the way, if we can give you a book party, let me know.
Yeah.
Oh, I love book parties. Yes, Del
we'll talk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You've earned one.
And now, today is the 50th anniversary of President Nixon. And we have an important author that feels that President Nixon was not done the right thing by.
Yep.
And we also have his son-in-law here, Ed Cox, and let's see what he says.
Absolutely. And joining us now, John, is Nick Bryant. He's author, investigative journalist, has a book called The Truth About Watergate. And it's a bombshell. And as you mentioned, John, it's the 50th anniversary of President Richard Nixon addressing the nation, announcing that he was going to resign. Nick, great to have you here. We also have Ed Cox. We have Governor Patterson, Judge Weinberg here. Talk about what you believe, history should have revealed sooner about President Nixon that you think should have viewed him more favorably.
What happened with Richard Nixon was a silent coup. And when he started his presidency, he really extended olive branches to both the Russians and the Chinese. He had been a cold warrior, but he saw that containment hadn't worked and it had been very expensive. So he opened China for diplomatic relations, and he started doing strategic arm limitation talks with the Russians. And that brought about an intense amount of antipathy from the Pentagon and also the State Department and the CIA, because he cut them out completely in his geopolitical moves. So the Department of Defense, or I should say the Joint Chiefs, actually had an espionage ring against Richard Nixon, trying to figure out what he was going to do with the Russians and also with the Chinese. And the Nixon administration eventually outed that espionage ring. It's called the Moore-Radford affair. And at that point, CIA operatives and agents had been infiltrating the Nixon administration. I liken it to like the last scene in Scarface, where Scarface burns the Bolivian drug lord and he sends droves of assassins. That's what the CIA did. And a number of them got into pretty strategic spots so that they could undermine Nixon. And Watergate was definitely set up by James McCord. He was one of the CIA agents that had infiltrated the administration, and he tried really hard to get busted. The first time they broke into the Watergate twice. The first time they broke into the Watergate, there were McCord and 4 swarthy Cubans. And they signed into the A4, which was the Federal Reserve Board, which had been
Nick, sorry to interrupt you, but real quick, we just have about 30 seconds. What is sort of the message that people can take away from the book and from the new message?
The message is that Nixon went up against some very powerful actors in the military-industrial complex, and they ultimately made sure that they did everything they possibly can to undermine his presidency. But a number of things, it was kind of like a harmonic convergence. A number of things came together that enabled them to depose Nixon.
Wow. Well, thank you, Nick Bryant. Really interesting and important to have you here on this anniversary. We'll have you back on again. It was really great to have
Nick,
you.
Maybe we'll have you on for the weekend show. So I'll call my office tomorrow.
That'd be wonderful.
Great. Okay. Congrats, Nick. Thank you very much.
And before we take a break, Ed Cox, any comment?
Yeah, look, there is a lot of malfeasance that was done. Ex parte communications with Judge Sirica by the special prosecutor.
Ed, absolutely correct. They never should have done it. Sirica, they made a hero, but he was totally wired with the prosecution, and that was disgraceful.
And then the Brady issues that evidence that should have been
exculpatory evidence that they hid. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Very interesting. Yeah, really
and
important.
all this is
important.
coming out now as a special this prosecutor's files are made available.
Yeah, wish they had come out sooner, Ed, don't you think? Thank you. Yeah,
They're
absolutely.
coming out now.
Thank goodness. Yeah, great to have you and get your perspective. Nick, thank you. We're going to take a quick break, everybody, and then Miranda Devine with some big scoops after the break.
It's a common sense recap of the big stories. It's Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
Well, we're going to go to Miranda Devine in just 1 minute. But the other day when I was on doing Sid's show Wednesday morning, I promised secrets to everybody. There's a big gala coming on September 6th. Let's play that promo.
Coming Friday, September 6th, WABC's Gala in Midtown Manhattan, the greatest show on earth.
Tonight is an amazing night. What a great honor. What an amazing feeling.
Honoring Tony Orlando.
A pioneer in the music industry.
You simply are so amazing.
Receiving the All-American Award for Broadcasting Excellence.
As an entertainer, you have inspired me. You have allowed me to be part of the WABC family.
With Cousin Brucey, the chairman of the music board.
The greatest audience ever in the world.
Plus, live entertainment all night long.
Bringing diverse voices together.
There's a limited amount of tickets available. Purchase tickets or make a donation at WABCRadio.com/gala. That's WABCRadio.com/gala. Proceeds to benefit the Tunnel to Towers Foundation for the Veterans, to the Police Athletic League for Inner City Kids, St. Francis Feeding the Hungry. September 6th, it's WABC's Gala in Midtown Manhattan, the greatest show on earth.
Wow, that's going to be the greatest show on earth. Well, the greatest show in New York City, at least.
Yeah, I would say maybe on earth, too, John.
Earth.
It sounds great.
We have a special guest on. Rita, why don't you bring Miranda in?
Yes, indeed. We have Miranda Devine, the great columnist there at the New York Post. Miranda, you say Tim Waltz, who calls everybody else weird, is weird. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. Well, look, I think that he's projecting the psychological art of projection when you accuse your opponents of something that you're guilty of. And so he's very happy to throw the weird slur around. But really, it's the pot calling the kettle black. And you just have to see how weird he and Kamala Harris are. I mean, it's weird that he put tampons into boys' bathrooms in Minnesota schools. It's pretty weird that the party that promotes itself as the guardian of democracy installs its leaders without an election. And it's pretty weird that he calls himself a great combat veteran, and yet as soon as his National Guard unit was having to be deployed to Iraq, he quit. So there are a lot of weird things about him.
You know, the other thing, also on the border, I mean, it was so bizarre when he was asked, what do you think of border wall? And he said, I'm going to buy a ladder company, a 30-foot ladder company, you know?
He said that?
Yes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, he makes no bones about it. What do you think America is going to look like? I mean, as we're hearing more, they're trying to make it sound like he's Mr. Rogers. You see, obviously, a different side, Miranda.
Well, yes. I mean, he's camouflaged in the sort of the look of a conservative rural man. You know, the Midwestern dad vibe is what the Democrats are drooling over. And yet inside, he's really a green-haired radical leftist. And you can see that from the way that he's ruled in Minnesota with an iron fist through COVID, with the most draconian authoritarian lockdown and mandates in the country. He really is a very unwise person to be even thought of in any leadership position in the country, let alone the entire country and the world.
Miranda, Judge Weinberg has a question.
Miranda, and how about the fact when he was governor, he allowed Minneapolis to burn down? They took over the police station, they burned it out, and he did nothing. And his daughter, as you point out in your great column, his daughter leaked the plans of the National Guard on the deployment. What do you think about that? What's weird about that?
Yeah, that's pretty weird, isn't it? He sat back for 3 days and let Minnesota just go to rack and ruin, rioters, looters, arsonists, and he just refused to call out the National Guard. He dawdled deliberately, he said, because he was sympathetic to the rioters' cause, whatever that was. And his wife, talk about weird, said that she kept the windows of their house open as long as possible so that she could smell the burning tires and savor the moment.
Yeah,
She said that?
By the way, she did. It's on audio tape, and she's like smiling. It's John. It's the most bizarre thing.
This is the same one. I understand. We had another guest before, Miranda, that they did their anniversary after the 10,000 people were killed at
Tiananmen Square. On the anniversary of Tiananmen Square. I mean, how bizarre is that?
And why would you choose that? And again, his wife said that he chose June 4 as their wedding date because he wanted to commemorate the Tiananmen massacre. Now, this is a man who travelled for the first time to China straight after that massacre, who's been back at least 30 times. NSA, former counter-terrorism officers have said, counterintelligence officers have said, that it's a very suspicious a relationship that he has with China. You don't go for these freebie trips to China so regularly without the Chinese military intelligence being involved. So I think he's probably compromised.
Yeah, Governor Patterson.
So, Miranda, I want to demur to your complaint and say that if everything that you have offered right now is true, do you think that would be enough that he might not make it past the convention?
I doubt it. I don't think. I mean, there's a lot of rumors that Kamala Harris will ditch him and try and start again. But
wait, they'll try to change the ticket again? Oh my gosh!
By the way, one other thing: have you copyrighted the term "grainhead radical"? That was pretty good.
The Gov liked that. You could see he was smiling. He thought that was a good line.
No, I'm shocked. I'm really shocked. I mean, all these things are true.
Yeah, of course.
Actually, the lockdown was even worse. It's just like the Chinese did, like Xi did, and
snitch line,
and with the snitches too, where there's a hotline.
He had a hotline.
Yes.
Randy, he had a hotline to snitch on the neighbors. Isn't that correct?
And by the way, it went beyond that, you guys. It went where like a neighbor said, so and so, my neighbor is not wearing a mask right now. They're inside vacuuming in their home. They're not wearing a mask. Can you come out? The snitch police, you know?
It's really, I mean, it's Stasi or it's Mao-like, and maybe that's what he's learned from China is, I mean, he did come back saying how wonderful it was that police state does not have much crime or any crime. That's the sort of mentality he has, that he really is a natural authoritarian, and he thinks that socialism is just another word for neighborliness.
We got 1 minute left. Anybody have anything special to say?
Judge Weinberg, you look like you have something special.
I have to tell you something. I think it should be required reading for anybody to read your column before they go in and they vote. How's that?
I love that. I think that's a great idea. Look, I just cannot understand how anybody could vote for these two. They're just so horribly unsuitable for the country. They are incompetent. They don't have any ideas that are going to grow the country or make people happier or unite the country. It's all division and destruction. And we've seen already, you know, with Joe Biden sort of running the country for the last almost 4 years, how disastrous everything's been with the border at the top.
Miranda, we love you. Thank you for telling the truth to the American people, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Great to be with you.
Thank you, Miranda.
Thank you.
You know what we all stand for, Miranda?
Truth, justice, and the American way.
God bless America, because we really need America's God's blessing.